Hi, this is Kevin Gong. This is part one of my chess tactic video on forks. So a fork is simply where you attack two or more of your opponent's pieces with one of your pieces. And any piece can fork your opponent. So to start with, I'm just going to go through all the different pieces and the different ways that they can fork your opponent. So let's start with the pawn. So in this position, move the pawn to e4, attacks both the king and the queen. That's check. And if black moves the king to the side, then you win the queen. Okay. So a fork is a good way to win material. So let's look at another pawn fork. Okay, so we move the pawn up to c4, attacking the bishop and the knight. Note that there's black will have to move one of the other pieces. If black moves the knight to c7, protecting the bishop, then black is still going to lose the bishop for the pawn. So that's no good. And if black moves the bishop to c6, then black is basically trading the knight for the pawn. So in either case, white is getting the better of it. So, and the other option is to simply take the pawn with the bishop, and then the rook takes it. Okay, so those are pawn forks. Let's move on to bishop forks. Okay, so bishop forks are pretty simple. Here you can move the bishop to d6, attacking both rooks, and after black moves one of them, then you take the other. Okay, and that's fine. You're giving up a bishop. You're basically trading your bishop for a rook, and since rooks are more valuable than bishops, then that's a good trade for you. Okay, let's look at another bishop fork. Okay, here we've forked the queen and rook with our bishop at d6. Note that in this case, our queen on g3 is protecting the bishop because otherwise the black queen could just take the bishop. So black queen moves away, and we take the rook. Okay. So let's move on to king forks. So even the king can fork the opponent. In this case, you can move the king up to b4, attacking both the bishop and knight at the same time. There's no way that black can protect both of them at the same time. If the knight moves away, there's no way it can protect the bishop. And the bishop is on the wrong color square to protect the knight. So one of them is going to fall. So the knight moves over there, and then white wins the bishop. Okay, one more king fork. Sometimes you can fork the rook and bishop. Here moving to b4. There's nowhere for the black rook to go and still protect the bishop. Okay, let's say it moves to a1, then we take the bishop. Okay, so those king forks. Let's move on to rook forks. So here we'll move the rook up to c5, attacking both bishops. And since the bishops are on different colors, there's no way they can protect each other. So black will move one of them away, and we take the other. Okay, so here's a case where we're going to fork the king and the queen with our rook. And of course, if black moves the king, then we'll just take the queen. So if black takes the rook with the queen, then we'll take the queen with the rook. So that's a case where to fork the king and the queen, you need something to protect the rook that's doing the forking. In this case, our other rook is protecting it. So let's move on to queen forks. So queens are great, especially in the endgame, because there's more space, there are more opportunities for forking. So here we can attack both the black king and rook by moving to f5, check. So we're going to win the rook. Okay, black king moves, we take the rook. Now suppose black moves bishop here. Is there a way that we can fork the king and bishop? Yeah, actually there's a couple. We can move to g4, attacking king and the bishop, and if black moves the king away, we'll take the bishop. If the bishop moves to d4 to block, we'll still take the bishop. There's actually a second way we can fork, which is if we move the queen up to e7, check, and black can't even block the check with the bishop, so we're going to win the bishop on the next move. Okay, so let's do one more queen fork. So while the queen can fork a lot in the endgame, it can also fork in the opening. So there's a couple of critical squares in the opening, the c6 and c3 squares. In this case, white can take the pawn on c6 and fork the king and the rook. So that's check, and after black blocks, we take the rook. Okay. So those two squares, c6 and c3, should be looking at those for forks with either the queen or the bishop. Alright, so let's move on to knight forks. So knights are usually the pieces you think of when you think of forks, because they can fork in a lot of different ways. So here's one of them. Okay, bring the knight to d5, attacking both rooks, and black will move one of them, and we'll take the other rook. Okay, so we've traded our knight for a rook, and again, the rook is more valuable than the knight. Let's look at another knight fork. Here we're attacking the rook and the queen. Queen moves, we take the rook. Okay. Okay, so sometimes we don't even have to lose our knight. In this case, we'll move the knight to e5, check, attacking the king and the queen at the same time, and then we take the queen. We don't even have to lose the knight. So let's look at one more knight fork. So I mentioned the c6 and c3 squares being vulnerable to forks by the bishop or queen. Well, in the same way, the c2 and c7 squares are vulnerable to forks by the knight. So here we'll take the pawn on c7 with our knight, check, forking the king and the rook. Okay, king moves. And one thing I should note here is that even if black manages to capture the knight, because it's kind of trapped here now, it's already taken the rook and a pawn, so even if we lose the knight, that's still good for white. So those are the basic forks. I ran through all the forks of all the different pieces. So in part 2 of this video, I'll go over some more advanced forks. Thanks for watching.